Over the years, I remember people saying Sonic Heroes isn't as good as a game as probably remember from their childhoods. Not to say the game was terrible, but a lot of people had been saying it was what started the dark age of Sonic that lasted from Sonic Heroes all the way up to maybe Sonic Colors, depending on who you ask. Now, while I tend to be a lot more positive in my reviews on both games and the industry as a whole, even I can't ignore that this game has a ton of flaws. Replaying it for this review, I finally realize what people were talking about when they say this game might be the game that started the Dark Ages. Normally, I would do a quick summary of the game's story, but to be fair, the story isn't really that grand. That's not to say it's non-existent, but there's really nothing for me to talk about. Team Sonic, comprising of Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, starts with them getting a note from Eggman telling them that he plans to take control of the world in 48 hours or so. So, in classic Sonic fashion, the three of them speed off to stop them. Now, before I move on to the other teams, I do want to mention the gameplay, mostly because the gameplay is more or less the same for each team, with their objectives being different for the most part. Now, instead of the adventure style gameplay of the last two games I reviewed, each team of three members do different things. Using Team Sonic as an example, Sonic is the speed character, able to use the Lightspeed Dash and a new tornado-like attack to fling enemies in the air, as well as having a homing attack. Tails, the flight character of Team Sonic, is able to carry his teammates to different places and launch allies at enemies and targets. Knuckles, the power character, able to punch enemies with stronger attacks and launch his friends at enemies in stronger attack than both Speed and Light characters. Now, each team has their own version of the different moves. For example, Team Chaotix actually doesn't use the Lightspeed attack. However, using the Tornado attack allows Espio, their speed character, to turn completely invisible. Getting back to the stories, Team Rose, comprising of Amy, Big the Cat, and newcomer to the franchise Cream the Rabbit, are looking for Big's frog and Cream's missing chow. If I remember correctly, I think Cream was originally supposed to be introduced in this game, but ended up being introduced in Sonic Advance 2 because it came out before this. That's all I can really say about this team. I don't care much for them or their story. Team Chaotix, comprising of Espio the Chameleon, Vector the Crocodile, and Charmy the Vegan, strangely from Knuckles Chaotix, have opened a detective agency and get a strange client who contacts them via walkie-talkie. I'm gonna spoil this now, but the client is Eggman, who had been kidnapped by the real villain of this game. I'll keep that character a bit more of a surprise until later, but it's not really a surprise if you play the other characters before Team Chaotix. In fact, before the final story, they are the last in the list, so I'd understand playing them last. They're not anything special, but I'll get to that later. The last of the teams is Team Dark. Here we have Rouge, Omega, and Shadow. It is interesting to me that the best story to me is Team Dark's, because we have Shadow, who seemingly died at the end of SA2, who, surprisingly enough, has amnesia and doesn't remember anything. So we get him trying to piece things together and figure out who he actually is. We also see as they try and find Eggman to get those answers. The only problem I have is they're considered the hard mode of the game, So while I am interested in their story, I don't like playing their playthrough because, well, 90% of it is just me dying. I remember downloading the demo of this onto my family's PC a ton of times and playing through the opening level. But that was when I was around like 6, maybe 7. I enjoyed my time with the demo, and even got a PlayStation 2 copy of the game a few years later and remember enjoying it then. Granted, I never finished it, and I do remember the PlayStation 2 version is considered the worst version of the main console trio. Playing the game for this review, I felt obligated just to finish the game, and I've never felt that way with any of the other games I've reviewed so far. Yeah, I may not have liked Going Commando, but I didn't feel obligated to finish it. I enjoyed my time with that game, despite it being my least favorite of the Ratchet trilogy. Here, I had multiple occasions where I just put the game down and went to do something else. And I don't like that feeling. I know that for the most part, in my reviews, I've been fairly positive. And even outside of my reviews, I've enjoyed games that are typically considered fairly bad. But even I have my limits when it comes to some games. I just didn't have as much of a good time here as I did with both adventure titles. The controls here are clunky, and on multiple occasions, I slipped off the edge of a platform to my death despite not doing anything. One of the more annoying things I dealt with was missing a grind rail or platform because I expected the game to automatically put me on the path because many Sonic games before and after have done that exact thing. Now, full disclaimer, I did play this game with mods on PC, and I'm sure someone out there will be upset for me using mods to improve my gameplay. The thing is, the mods I use didn't fix any of the problems with the basic gameplay. The controls still feel like the characters are covered in a nice coating of wax. Each team's stories are non-entities, and frankly, the game just felt annoying. That being said, the main mod I used was the Sonic Heroes Adventure mod, which makes the pacing of the game more in line with the adventure games. This changes the game up slightly so that Team Sonic skips the second act of an area, while Team Dark skips Act 1. Basically, Team Sonic skips every second level, Team Dark skips every first level, and does that second one. However, Team Rose and Team Chaotix weren't changed. As far as I could tell, they were exactly the same. And for the most part, I only used these mods so that I could record this game easier. Team Rose, luckily, is already the easy mode of the game, and didn't really take as much effort as the other teams. Their story still sucked, but at least I could easily break through the stages. Team Chaotix, on the other hand, is probably the most annoyed I got at this game. While I didn't have a hard time with their stages, and I didn't mind exploring these stages, I'm being forced to look under every nook and cranny to find crabs in the first stage. And later, even had to defeat literally every enemy in a stage just to finish it. It's not as fun, especially when these controls just don't work with what the game is asking me to do. And while yes, the crab hunting is just one stage, the other stages aren't much better. They share the same problem to me that Big and Gamma had in SA1. The Chaotix should have been an optional story, but unfortunately, they're required to unlock the final story. And when most of your time is spent combing the stages for an item, you'll probably hate the game's controls as much as I did. I used to think this game was cool and fun, but the older I've gotten, the more I understand when people say this is where Sonic started faltering. That being said, we do still have that final story to get through, so let's wrap this up before I start turning this into a rant. So, right before the final stages in every team's story, we see them fight Eggman, only to reveal that that fight was against a Eggman robot. Each team seems to just kind of ignore this fact as the robot melts, except for Team Chaotix and maybe Team Dark. Vector starts to catch on that something is a bit fishy about all of these Eggman fights, and quickly puts two and two together before finding the person who had hired them in the first place, which, of course, is Eggman. It turns out Metal Sonic went rogue and took over the whole Eggman Empire, planning to take over the world and wanted to gain each team's bio data to transform into a large metal dragon, which said transformation ends up taking a good minute and a half as we watch him go from this nice looking metal robot allegory for Sonic to a dragon about the size of a, I want to say skyscraper, but even that sounds wrong. Eggman explains the only possible way they could defeat Metal now was if they had the Chaos Emeralds. Luckily, we got them earlier, which of course we did, because we had to just to unlock this final story. And frankly, before I move on, I have to address the special stages and getting the Chaos Emeralds. Because, yes, they are required to complete the game. And Christ, these special stages are annoying. First off, they're the half pipe stages from Sonic 2, just now a full pipe, I guess. What doesn't help is paired with this game's already clunky and slippery controls, it feels as if the game is asking you to be precise with controls that go against that, just to get a Chaos Emerald. Having to swerve between bombs, even though you know full well that you're going to slam into 50 of them, losing your chance to get the Chaos Emerald. I remember watching Some Call Me Johnny's review about a decade ago, and what he said in that review, I agree with. If you don't get the Chaos Emeralds within the first 5 fucking seconds of the stage, you might as well just give up and try the stage again. It's such a pain in the ass for a game that's targeted towards fucking 7-year-olds. How do you expect these kids to get through this? Anyway, after that rant, I should just get back to the story and wrap this up. Sonic decides he'll power up to stop Metal, with Tails and Knuckles helping him. In the meantime, all the other teams attack him as a distraction to weaken him, just so Sonic and the rest of his team can finish him off. It is nice to see each team actually help to take on the final boss, something that, funnily enough, we do get to see in later games in some extent. But all in all, this fight is just okay. I enjoy the fight before Supersonic fights Metal because it's just a little more exciting seeing each team work to bring Metal Sonic down at least a notch so that Supersonic can finish him off. Also, Tails and Knuckles don't even really get super forms, instead getting lame shields. Granted, it's not like it's easy for me to show that because one of the mods I did use for my playthrough replaces their skins with ones that look closer to their super forms from Sonic 3 and Knuckles. It is nice that I have them, but honestly, they're more or less just cosmetic. They don't really power them up outside of looking nicer. Anyway, with Metal Sonic finally defeated, he asked how Sonic and his friends could have defeated him, with Sonic just saying,
Because we're Sonic heroes.
I hate that line, it's so stupid. This game is a mess. While I don't think this is the worst game I've ever played, hell, it's not even a terrible game, it wasn't easy to return to in the slightest. The slippery controls alone made it hard to even play, and I was more or less falling asleep to the not even Saturday morning cartoon writing of the stories. Now, to be fair, a lot of times in Sonic games, I've kind of just skipped the stories and moved on to gameplay because that's the most fun I've had, but when the gameplay is as tedious as Sonic Heroes can be, there's not really a whole lot of fun I can get out of it. Again, I don't think this is the worst game I've ever played. Hell, I have definitely played worse. But for what it's asking players to do, especially players in the age range this game was targeted towards, it makes me wonder how they ever expected younger kids to get past this. I might have liked this as a kid had I grown up with it, and technically I did, albeit only the demo. But part of me feels like if I had the full game, I would have hated it if I couldn't get past just Team Sonic. I wanted to quit the game on multiple occasions, and mostly just finished it out of obligation for this review, and I hate that. I said back in my Ratchet & Clank reviews that I hate if I feel like I'm not making progress in a game, and here it's just as bad. Ironically, in Going Commando, I was enjoying myself even if I didn't feel like I was making much progress. Yeah, I was annoyed there, but at least there was something. Here, I'm doing a stage 50 times just to get past it, and all the while dying and not feeling like any of the deaths were my fault. Going Commando, I knew most of the deaths were my fault, and it was just I wasn't as good at the game as I would have liked. That's bad game design. If you feel like any death you make wasn't yours. All this negativity aside, it's not to say I didn't have fun here, but most of my fun was just from the early stages of the game. The further I went, even in just Team Sonic's playthrough, I got more and more frustrated with the game. If it weren't for the Sonic Adventure mod that I used, I probably would have completely given up on this review and moved on to something else. I bet my younger self would have enjoyed this game to a point, but as someone who is in the latter half of his 20s, it's not as fun anymore. All that being said, we still have 2 more Sonic games to play for this marathon, and I guess Shadow is getting the spotlight next. I don't really have anything witty to say, so I'll see you guys next time. Hopefully, I can be at least a little more positive, but knowing my feelings beforehand about Shadow, it's not looking great. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time.